If you've ever thought about moving abroad, you need to listen to this. One of the important considerations in moving to a new place is healthcare. And I think we all know that healthcare in the United States has some serious troubles. And healthcare outside the United States is in many cases simply better. But there are things you need to be aware of. Personally, I was kind of thrown into the deep end a few weeks ago when I had to have an emergency appendectomy right here in Serbia. But everyone I know who lives this lifestyle of slow travel and moving other places has had interesting experiences with healthcare abroad. These stories definitely have a good side, but they often have a harder side to them as well, and it's worth some consideration and knowledge. Of course, before having any real idea what you're stepping into, you have to have an idea where you might be moving. But anywhere in Europe, I think there are some strong commonalities. And in planning this video, one of the things that's surprising to me is I think I would recommend anyone, anywhere in the world, still having worldwide private healthcare insurance. Do you need it absolutely everywhere in the world? Well, probably not, but I think I can make a really strong case that you probably should consider it no matter where you live. If you're new to the channel, my wife and I lived in Latvia for 6 years. We've now lived in Serbia for 1.5 years. My wife's originally from Mexico. I'm obviously from the United States, and we're not that young anymore, so we've had a lot of experiences with healthcare a lot of different places in the world. In Latvia, we only had public healthcare, and in Serbia, we have private worldwide healthcare with Cigna insurance. And while I believe public healthcare is probably great in both of those countries, I don't think I'll ever again go without private worldwide healthcare. I'm not sponsored in any way at all, but here in Serbia we have Cigna healthcare, and I've found their network is huge, and in the times when we've had to pull on the insurance, it's been just fine. Like, yeah, sure, there's a few hours on the phone and that's frustrating, but I think that's the truth with any healthcare insurance company. And on top of our own personal experiences, we have very close friends in Germany, we've got family in Spain. I'm always looking at where expats are moving, and I'm super fascinated with the fact that all the rage I see in Europe right now is expats are moving to Albania. Well, these stories and experiences and research and all of this stuff just means I think I've got a lot to share with you if you're thinking about taking that jump across the pond. Now, before diving in a bit, just to acknowledge your own biases, throw it in the comments. From best to worst, how would you expect these countries to rank in terms of healthcare? Albania, Germany, Latvia, Serbia, and Spain. I've picked these countries specifically because they're far-ranging in terms of quality of care, and also there's some systems that I know a little bit about. So throw it in the comments or at least acknowledge to yourself, best to worst, what would you expect it to be? And later on in the video, I'll tell you exactly what I think. I've been very pleased to learn I believe both Latvia and Serbia to have super high quality healthcare, even in just the public sector. But also there to be very interesting differences between the two. And the one that was most apparent to my wife and I when we moved to Serbia is that we found out in Latvia, they still super buy into holistic healthcare. That's not to say that healthcare in Serbia is not holistic, but in Serbia, it's much more evidence-based. So just to give a couple examples, I actually have elevated cholesterol. And in Latvia, I was prescribed both a statin drug, which is like the most normal prescription, and a fish oil. When we moved to Serbia and I went to see the heart specialist, he literally laughed out loud at the prescription for fish oil. He of course continued the prescription for the statin, and he told me, like, you don't need a prescription. If you want to take this, you can just buy it full price. Now, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong here, but I am saying there is a stark difference. Another one that I thought was really funny is in Latvia, for antiseptic, we were told by the doctors, oh, just buy bottom shelf vodka and it'll be fine. Like, coming from the West, this is laughable, but also it's super cheap. So another thing that I think is super interesting when we consider differences between healthcare in different countries is a lot of countries will have very quality work done, but the care you receive afterwards can vary massively. And then even the work that you need to have done also might not be available depending on do you live in a big city or not. For example, I've mentioned it's like all the rage right now that expats are talking about moving to Albania where life is cheap. But I tell you what, I don't think any of those expats are talking about moving to Tirana. And if you live on the Albanian coast, I'm willing to bet you have to go to Tirana to get any type of quality medical care. Well, my wife and I live in Belgrade, where there's definitely quality medical care available. But if we could choose to live anywhere in Serbia, I don't know, we might choose another place. And a couple years ago, it's not something I would have thought about, but now it's definitely something I'll think about. That, like, is there quality medical care in some smaller city where we want to live? For example, the big expat communities in Serbia, I think, are in Subotica and Novi Sad. So would those people have to come to Belgrade to get quality medical care? Honestly, I'm not sure. And it might depend on what type of procedure. So in terms of the care you receive, and I mean like not the surgery itself, but what the experience in the hospital is like. I would expect it in all of Europe, Germany to have the most similar type of care to the United States. But the stories I've heard are quite alarming in their differences. For example, our good friends who live in Germany had a very, very sick kid at one point, and they thought she might need surgery. So of course they go into emergency services, tests are done so the kid doesn't need anything like right now urgently, but they recommend that the kid spend the night. What's alarming is there was like this big room with tons and tons of kids spending the night in hospital beds, and everyone spends the night in the same room. And it was expected that they would just leave their kid and go home. Now, thankfully, when they pressed the issue, the mom was allowed to spend the night, and for a small cost, they rolled out a cot for her to spend the night next to her kid. But my point is this: in the country where you would expect the most similar medical care to the United States in all of Europe, you might find medical care looks quite different. With the stories we've heard from Spain and Germany, and with our experience in Latvia, I would have been quite uncertain about what medical care looks like here in Serbia. And still, in terms of public healthcare, I can only talk about the stories I've heard. But I will say my experience with private healthcare was pretty great. And here's what I think is my first strong argument to have private worldwide healthcare insurance no matter where you live. The stories I've heard about public hospitals here in Serbia is that family is not allowed to visit at all. Well, I was super thankful to be posted up in a room in the hospital that had 2 beds, but thankfully the other bed wasn't needed, so I had my own private room, and my wife was allowed to stay pretty much dawn till dusk every single day. In that exact same hospital with private healthcare insurance, I do have a friend who had to stay up in the ICU. In intensive care, of course, the nurses have to have like line of sight to everywhere, and it was a much harder experience. My friend's spouse was not allowed to visit at all. Since the building is like an older building that was retrofitted into a hospital, not only did the nurses have line of sight into every room, but he actually had line of sight into other people's rooms as well. And the hard part is that there was an older woman who was quickly going downhill towards the light at the end of the tunnel. That would be a very hard place to sit and recover when you're not allowed to see your family at all and you are watching someone have a terrible experience. My point here is simply this: you would expect healthcare in Germany to be great and in Serbia to have more variation. You would expect private insurance to provide you with great care and public insurance maybe not so much. But I would say just in any of these cases, you need to be prepared for the fact that the care in the hospital might not be exactly the standard that you would expect in the United States. The very nice flip side is it is a fraction of the cost. We all know that the cost of healthcare in the United States is broken, and I'll tell you, it's insane how broken it is. Here in Europe, the experiences might be a little harder, but you pay pennies on the dollar, and that's if you have to pay. In Latvia, I was bit by a dog in the forest and the owner was nowhere to be seen. So the responsible thing is that I had to go and get a rabies shot in the hospital. I went into emergency care, and at the end, the receptionist was so apologetic that I had to pay €7. So if you're moving somewhere else, like in the UK or Australia, would the public healthcare be fine and the aftercare in the hospital be the standard that you'd expect? Sure, maybe, but it's definitely something I would look into way before it matters. Another super interesting contrast is I had a friend who needed hand surgery, and he got surgery in Dubai by a robot in the mall, and he swears it's some of the best healthcare he's ever gotten. So you never know, but it's worth investigation. All right, so earlier I asked you to go ahead and rank best to worst the quality of healthcare in Albania, Germany, Latvia, Serbia, and Spain. And we're getting really close to where I'll tell you what I think. But there are a couple more things that I have to point out. And one is that you might have access to quality healthcare, but you might have to wait a long time. This is one of the really common arguments in the United States is like, if you're willing to wait, you can get quality healthcare, but if you need it now, it's worth just paying and coming to the US. Well, there is something to that. And I'll tell you, in Latvia, there's a whole new level of sarcasm in talking about the saying, time heals all. Because if you need an MRI, there's a good chance in 6 months when you get it, you've already healed. I mean, this is fair. My understanding is in Spain, you also have to wait a long time for things like this. In Serbia, with private healthcare, we found you don't really have to wait at all. But if you had public healthcare, I don't know, maybe you do. There's one other super huge piece to the puzzle, which is the question is, what kind of procedure do you need? I was very specific to say earlier that I was talking about routine surgeries. Well, what if you need some surgery that has some new modern advancement? I'd never really thought about this before until I have a friend here in Serbia who had to get a major joint replacement. Now, in terms of a joint replacement, there probably are some super modern innovations, maybe in like materials or in some sort of computerized motivation or maybe even some AI thing. But honestly, if there's a super modern innovation like that, I think it's unlikely you find someone to do it in a smaller country like Serbia or Latvia. I think it's fairly well known that if you want quality modern care like that, you really have to go to the north in Europe. Somewhere probably like Germany, Sweden, Norway, maybe Austria or Switzerland, and maybe somewhere else. But the fact is, you might have to go out of country. To me personally, this is another massive argument to have private worldwide healthcare. So you have those options. If you need to go somewhere else to get healthcare, you have that option. And I bet there are a lot of things that could happen where you'd need something modern like this. I know someone else who had to have a heart valve replacement, and they actually went in through the vein in his thigh. Like they went in laparoscopically through his thigh to replace a valve in his heart. That's crazy. Like, could you get healthcare like that in Serbia? Maybe, I don't really know. But that's exactly why I'd want to be prepared to go wherever I need to go to get that care. All right, so if I were gonna rank these 5 countries, like where is the best care, that last piece is exactly the reason that I think Germany is clear above the rest. Now, honestly, between these 5 countries, Germany is by far the largest country, so part of that might just be you have a whole lot more people, so you have a whole lot more doctors, you have a whole lot more access to modern procedures. But despite all that, I would say Germany is probably some of the best healthcare in Europe. All of the other nations on this list, including Spain, I think are places that I would really only trust routine surgeries. And so when I think of where can you get really quality work done with routine surgeries, I think it's anywhere that has really quality technical education. Serbia and Latvia definitely have great technical education. Spain, I think, has a much larger variation in technical education. Like, I'm sure you can get someone in any technical field, including doctors, that are very great at their craft, but I wouldn't trust everyone in the nation necessarily, just saying there's a large variation. My understanding is Albania is clearly gonna be the bottom of this list. Like in Tirana, there probably is quality medical care. Anywhere else in Albania, I wouldn't trust it at all. So personally on my list, I've got Germany on top, Latvia and Serbia probably tied in second place. In fourth, I'm gonna put Spain and Albania last. Now, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but I think this all just adds to the fact that in the United States, you definitely need private medical insurance. If you don't have it, you're at risk of bankruptcy every single day if anything happens. But outside of the United States, I really also think you need private healthcare insurance. And the difference is you might have to go somewhere else. You need to make sure that you have worldwide coverage. And lastly, if you slow travel like we do, or if this is a lifestyle that you're interested in, you'll probably spend mass amounts of time in another nation. So even though I think public healthcare here in Serbia is probably trustworthy, something might happen while we're visiting my family in the US or my wife's family in Mexico. And if we didn't have worldwide coverage, we might be out of luck. And by out of luck, I mean if we were uninsured in the United States, we're probably bankrupt. Well, I touched on this before, but this is one of the best aspects of healthcare in Europe. When I checked into the hospital for my appendectomy, they actually wanted me to pay out of pocket, and then they would reimburse me when the insurance company paid. And the grand total they wanted for all the tests and my surgery and several days in the hospital was 4,000 euros. I'm willing to bet in the United States for similar care, you're looking at more like 40,000 euros. So if you're considering jumping the pond and moving abroad, one of those costs you think you might save would be on healthcare, and it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than in the United States, but I would still recommend you hanging on to that worldwide private healthcare coverage. But we've also got our little doggy Lily with us over here, and veterinary care is a totally different story. I'll be making that video soon, and if you're interested, it'll be hooked right here on screen. And until then, maybe this video is more interesting, so check it out.